What happens when a 24-year-old billionaire's son looks straight at Judge Caprio and says, "You can't touch me"? Before this story ends, a packed courtroom will go dead silent, a father will do something nobody saw coming, and one arrogant young man will learn the price of mistaking money for power. Drop a comment telling us what justice means to you, because this one will test everything you believe. At 9:17 on a gray Tuesday morning in Providence, Rhode Island, Courtroom 3B looked like any other traffic session. Fluorescent lights, oak benches polished by years of nervous hands, a brass clock ticking over the state seal. But by 9:19, the air had changed. You could feel it before anyone said a word. If you believe no one should be above the law, hit that subscribe button right now. Because this story starts with arrogance and ends in a way nobody in that room would ever forget. The clerk, Angela Morty, called the case in a voice so practiced it almost sounded bored. City of Providence versus Liam Sterling. Case number PMCTR 24-11873 and related municipal citations. She adjusted her glasses, glanced up, and then glanced up again, because the man standing at the defense table didn't look like someone who had ever been told to wait for anything in his life. Liam Sterling was 24 years old, 6 feet 1, all angles and expensive tailoring. He wore a charcoal Tom Ford suit fitted close through the shoulders, a white shirt with no tie, and a Rolex Daytona that flashed every time he moved his hand. His dark hair looked intentionally careless, the kind of haircut that probably cost more than most people's car payments. His loafers were black Christian Louboutins with the red sole catching the courtroom lights every time he shifted his weight. Even his expression looked custom-made. It was the expression of a man who had spent years learning that rules were for everyone else. Like this video, if you've ever watched somebody walk into a room acting like consequences were optional. At the rail behind him sat two local reporters, 3 law students from Roger Williams, a retired postal worker waiting on a parking ticket, and a mother with a toddler who had wandered in because every other seat outside was full. By the time Judge Frank Caprio stepped onto the bench at 9:22, even the bailiff, Darnell Reed, had that look on his face that seasoned courthouse people get when they know a routine morning is about to become the most talked-about thing in the building. Judge Caprio took his seat without hurry, black robe neat, reading glasses low on his nose, hands folded, calm the way old stone is calm, the kind of calm that doesn't bend because somebody else is loud. Everybody in that courtroom knew his reputation, the patience, the compassion, the way he could disarm anger without raising his voice, but everyone in that room was about to learn something else. Compassion and weakness are not the same thing. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," he said. Liam didn't answer right away. He looked up at the bench, then sideways at the courtroom camera with its little red recording light. Anyone who had watched a public courtroom clip knew what that meant. If things went wrong, millions could watch it later. Maybe Liam knew that too. Maybe that was why he smiled. "Morning," he said at last. "No, Your Honor, no respect, just one clipped syllable." Angela Morty began reading the list. Obstruction of emergency access lane outside Rhode Island Hospital on December 18, 2024, at 8:42 a.m. Failure to comply with lawful order from a traffic officer. Disorderly conduct. Unlawful stopping in a marked ambulance zone. Verbal threat made against a city employee in connection with a pending hearing. 2 previously unpaid citations folded into the same appearance. And that was just what the city could prove on paper. Share this with someone who needs to see what real accountability looks like, because what happened next made the room freeze. Judge Caprio looked down at the file. "Mr. Sterling, how do you plead to the municipal violations?" Liam leaned into the microphone like he was stepping onto a podcast. "Not guilty to all of it. This is a circus." A ripple moved through the gallery. Judge Caprio looked up. "This courtroom is not a circus, son." Liam shrugged. "Depends who's watching." That got a few sharp breaths from the benches. Even the reporters stopped typing for a second. Now, to understand why that line hit the room so hard, you need to understand who Liam Sterling was before he ever stood under that seal. He wasn't just rich. Plenty of rich kids pass through courtrooms. Liam belonged to a particular kind of wealth, the insulated kind, the generational kind, the kind that moves quietly through law firms and private terminals and foundation galas, and teaches a boy very early that bad news can be delayed, softened, buried, or billed by the hour. His father, Charles Sterling IV, had built Sterling Bioventures from a cold storage SH. Ipping startup into a logistics empire worth an estimated $6.4 billion. Their family had a glass penthouse overlooking Central Park, a waterfront estate in Watch Hill, and a private hangar at Teterboro. Liam had grown up with drivers, prep schools, summer sailing coaches, and a staff that referred to him as Master Liam when he was still in middle school. But money wasn't the whole story. At 15, Liam lost his mother, Evelyn Sterling, to ovarian cancer. She had been the warm center of the house, the one person who said no without flinching. After she died, Charles Sterling buried himself in mergers, meetings, and philanthropy. Grief turned the family home into a museum with better catering. Liam learned fast that if he broke something, somebody would replace it. If he insulted someone, someone else would apologize. If he scared people, they often stepped back. He mistook that retreat for respect. By 19, he'd been quietly removed from one private academy after a hazing complaint. By 21, there had been non-disclosure agreements after a hotel altercation in Miami. By 23, he had a reputation from Newport to Tribeca for turning every room into a stage and every boundary into a dare. And now, at 24, he was standing in front of a judge who had spent decades looking past surfaces and into character. Judge Caprio flipped one page, then another. The city is prepared to present body camera footage, hospital security video, witness testimony, and a transcript of a voicemail left from my clerk's office. Before we do that, Mr. Sterling, is there anything you'd like to say? This was the moment, the easy moment. The moment when almost any lawyer would whisper, show humility, own something, don't make this worse. Liam had counsel beside him, a silver-haired defense attorney named Brent Halpern, but Halpern looked as tense as piano wire. He leaned in and whispered. Liam waved him off without even looking at him. Yes, Liam said. I'd like to say the city has spent more money chasing this nonsense than the fines are worth. And I'd like to say certain people here seem excited to turn a parking dispute into some kind of morality play. The toddler's mother in the back actually whispered, "Wow." Judge Caprio remained still. A parking dispute. That's what it was. An ambulance zone at Rhode Island Hospital. For 3 minutes. Angela Morty looked down at her notes. Judge Caprio's voice did not rise. 3 minutes can be the longest time in a person's life. The line landed so hard the whole room went quiet. One of the law students actually stopped mid-breath. That was the first quote people would repeat later. Liam smirked. With respect, Your Honor, people love dramatics when there's a camera. There it was, the first open cut, the first sign that he wasn't here to resolve anything. He was here to dominate the room. Judge Caprio turned slightly. Officer Ruiz, please step forward. At 9:31, Officer Elena Ruiz took the witness stand. She was 38, Traffic Enforcement Unit, compact build, dark hair pulled into a low bun, uniform pressed, posture straight. If Liam had spent his life around people who softened things for him, Elena Ruiz was the opposite. She had the look of someone who had worked through storms, holidays, double shifts, and excuses. She swore in, then folded her hands. Officer, Judge Caprio said, walk us through the morning of December 18th. Ruiz nodded. At approximately 8:42 a.m., I responded to a radio call for a black Ferrari Purisang stopped in the marked ambulance access zone at the emergency entrance of Rhode Island Hospital. Weather was sleet, low visibility, moderate foot traffic. On arrival, I observed the vehicle unoccupied, engine running, driver's side door unlocked, hazard lights off. She glanced toward Liam once, only once. I also observed hospital staff attempting to guide an arriving ambulance around the blocked lane. What happened next? Roughly 30 seconds after I arrived, the defendant exited the coffee shop on the corner carrying 2 drinks and a phone on a selfie stick. He appeared to be recording. I instructed him to move the vehicle immediately. He laughed. He stated, quote, "Relax, officer, nobody's dying because of me." That sentence hit like cold water. A woman in the back whispered, "Oh my God." Liam leaned toward his attorney and muttered something. Halpern didn't answer. Judge Caprio asked, "Did he comply?" "No, Your Honor." He continued filming. He re-entered the vehicle only after a second order. Instead of pulling straight forward as directed, he accelerated sharply, cut across the loading lane, and stopped at an angle that forced an EMT team to unload from the passenger side. During that movement, an elderly hospital volunteer was struck by the opening passenger door and fell. The room tightened. That was Leonard Baptiste. And until that moment, most people in the room thought this was going to be Anna. Our rich kid ticket story. Annoying, maybe infuriating, but familiar. What they didn't know yet was how many lives those 3 minutes had touched. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever seen one lie start to collapse the second the facts come out. Because the video Judge Caprio played next changed everything. Judge Caprio nodded to the clerk. "Play the footage." Angela dimmed the courtroom monitor. The red recording light on the public camera blinked steady. Somewhere in the back, one of the reporters lifted her phone, not to record, but to take notes faster. The body cam opened with sleet streaking across the lens and the harsh blue-white glare of hospital emergency lights bouncing off wet pavement. The timestamp read 12/18/24/08/42/19. There it was, the Ferrari, midnight black, idling in the painted ambulance lane like the rules had peeled away around it. You could hear sirens in the distance, wind, EMTs yelling, "Move, move, move." A nurse in navy scrubs sprinting across frame, a woman holding a little boy wrapped in a hospital blanket, a volunteer in a green jacket waving his arms to redirect people. Then Liam appeared on screen in a camel Burberry overcoat, carrying 2 coffees, selfie stick angled toward his face. Officer Ruiz's recorded voice came through the speakers. "Sir, move the vehicle now. You are blocking emergency access." On screen, Liam laughed. "1 sec. Now, sir." He took a sip of coffee. "Do you know how insane this looks? You guys are acting like I parked on a runway." The toddler in the back started whining. Her mother shushed her without taking her eyes off the screen. Ruiz again. "Sir, get in the car." Liam swung the selfie stick around so the camera caught the ambulance behind him. Apparently, Providence Emergency Services can't survive a 3-minute latte run. Gasps, actual gasps. Then the body cam caught what happened in the next 8 seconds. Liam opened the driver's door. A hospital volunteer moved closer, one hand lifted, telling him to stop. Liam shoved the door wider. The edge caught the older man in the hip and thigh. He stumbled backward on the wet curb, slipped, and struck the side of his face against a metal bollard. The nurse in blue scrubs lunged to help him. The mother with the little boy screamed. Then Liam got in, revved, and jerked the Ferrari forward so sharply that slush sprayed across the lower half of the screen. The courtroom speakers carried every sound, the thud, the shout, the skid. And then, worst of all, the child's terrified cry. When the footage stopped, nobody moved. Even Liam had gone a shade paler, though he still kept his chin up. Judge Caprio let the silence sit there. He didn't rush to fill it. A lesser judge might have pounced. He didn't need to. The truth had already spoken. Finally he said, "Mr. Sterling, does that look like a parking dispute to you?" Liam exhaled through his nose. It looks like a chaotic morning where everyone overreacted. A stunned laugh escaped from somewhere in the back, the kind people make when reality gets so twisted they can't believe they heard it correctly. Officer Ruiz then added something she had not mentioned yet. Your Honor, after the recording ended, I informed the defendant he would be cited. He stepped close enough that my body cam microphone distorted. He stated, quote, "Tell whoever judges this circus that my father can buy this city block." That was the second quote people would repeat later. Judge Caprio turned his eyes back to Liam. Did you say that? No. Officer Ruiz says you did. She's wrong. Ruiz answered before anyone asked. It is on the secondary audio file from my lapel mic. Another shift in the room, another crack in the wall around him. Liam's attorney finally stood. Your Honor, if I may, the defense disputes context and tone. Judge Caprio nodded once. You'll have your chance, counsel. But if Brent Halpern expected to steer this back onto safe legal ground, that possibility disappeared when the city called its next witness. Maya Torres walked to the stand at 9:48 with her left wrist still supported by a beige brace under the cuff of her cardigan. She was 32, an emergency room nurse, dark curls pulled back, no makeup except whatever the night shift had left behind, eyes tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. She wore plain black flats and a navy dress that looked chosen for practicality, not performance. She swore in, then faced the bench. Ms. Torres, the city attorney said, where were you on December 18th? In the emergency entrance bay. I had just come off an overnight shift, but we were short-staffed because of the weather, so I stayed. Her voice was steady, not dramatic. That made it worse. She described the ambulance carrying 7-year-old Noah Whitaker, who was in severe respiratory distress after an asthma attack triggered by a heating system failure in his apartment building. She described the sleet, the delay, the reroute, the way the MTS had to unload farther from the entrance because the lane was blocked. I ran with the pediatric respiratory kit, she said. When Mr. Baptiste fell, I changed direction to help him. My left foot hit the slush ridge by the curb. I went down hard and caught myself with my hand. I fractured 2 small bones in my wrist. I finished the shift anyway. That line got a visible reaction from the gallery. The mother with the toddler pressed a hand to her chest. Why does that matter in relation to this hearing? The city attorney asked. Maya looked at Liam for the first time. Because he keeps calling it nothing. Because people like him say nobody got hurt, when what they mean is nobody that mattered to them. The courtroom went completely still again. If that line hit you, drop a comment telling us the moment you stopped feeling angry and started feeling personal. Because for people in that courtroom, this was the point where it changed. Maya continued. My wrist healed. Mostly. That little boy recovered too, thank God. But when I hear someone laugh about blocking an ambulance lane, I hear his mother screaming and I remember Mr. Baptiste bleeding into the slush while this man held 2 coffees like his morning was the emergency. Liam opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he had no smirk ready. The city then called Leonard Baptiste. When Lenny stood, people in the gallery turned to look because he moved slowly, with the careful balance of someone who knew how hard a fall could echo through old bones. He was 67, retired school custodian, hospital volunteer 3 mornings a week, green cardigan, pressed shirt, hearing aids tucked behind both ears. 4 faint pink lines still marked the spot above his eyebrow where he'd taken stitches. He raised his right hand and was sworn in. What were you doing that morning? The city attorney asked. Trying to clear a path, Lenny said. That's my whole job when I volunteer, clear a path, smile at families, point folks where they need to go, sometimes hold the door when they got too much in their hands. His voice had a soft Caribbean lilt, gentle, measured. I saw the car and thought maybe the driver was lost. Then the officer came. Then that young man came back with his coffee, laughing like the whole thing was a joke. He paused and touched the mark above his eye. Next thing I know, I'm looking at the sky. The gallery shifted with a low murmur. Did he say anything to you after you fell? The attorney asked. Lenny looked down for a second. Yes. What did he say? He looked at me and said, maybe don't stand so close to expensive things. The reaction was immediate, audible, a collective inhale, then a wave of disgust so strong it felt physical. Even the judge's jaw set. Liam shook his head. That's not what I said. Lenny didn't raise his voice. Son, at my age, I don't need to invent disrespect. I know it when I hear it. That was the third quote people would repeat later. Brent Halpern stood for cross-examination and tried to suggest confusion, whether distortion, stress, memory contamination. It failed almost instantly, not because he was a poor lawyer, but because he was defending the indefensible with a client who looked contemptuous of the entire process. Then came the thing nobody in the courtroom had heard yet. The voicemail. Judge Caprio looked down at the case file. Ms. Morty, please confirm for the record the call your office received on January 3rd. Angela Morty swallowed. She was not someone who liked being part of the story. Court clerks survive by becoming invisible, but now every eye in the room moved to her. At 4:57 p.m., she said, reading from a typed transcript, our office received a voicemail from a male caller identifying himself as Liam Sterling. The message included profanity and the statement, quote, tell Caprio if he wants to embarrass me on camera, I'll have people looking into every person in that courtroom. He won't like what happens when my family stops being nice. Silence. Then a whispered wow. Judge Caprio lifted his gaze. Mr. Sterling, did you leave that message? Liam rolled one shoulder. I don't remember. Would hearing it help? He hesitated half a beat too long. Do whatever you want. Angela played it. The recording was worse than the transcript. Slurred enough to sound angry, clear enough to remove all doubt. Liam's voice, his cadence, his contempt, and underneath the words, the unmistakable confidence of a man who had never before believed that a threat might bounce back and strike him instead. When it ended, Darnell Reed, the bailiff, shifted one step closer to the defense table. That was when Judge Caprio asked the question that split the story in two. Mr. Sterling, he said, do you understand where you are? Liam leaned forward. His face had reddened around the ears, not with shame yet, but with the fury of someone discovering that pressure no longer worked. I understand exactly W. Here I am, he said. I'm in a room where everyone already decided what I am. Judge Caprio answered softly. No, son, you're in a room where your own words are introducing you. That was the fourth quote people would repeat later. You could feel the gallery lock in even harder. This was no longer about a blocked lane. It was about identity, about the story Liam told himself versus the one the evidence had now laid out in public. And then Liam made the mistake that changed his life. He straightened his cuffs, looked straight at the bench and said, with all due respect, Judge, you have no idea who you're dealing with. The courtroom seemed to physically recoil. Judge Caprio did not blink. You're right, he said. I know only what you have shown me. That should worry you. But Liam kept going. My father has given more to this state than everyone in this room combined. Hospitals, scholarships, foundations. If you think this little performance is going to end with me begging, you're mistaken. That brought Brent Halpern to his feet, so fast his chair nearly tipped. Your Honor, my client is emotional. I'm going to ask for a brief recess. Judge Caprio looked at Liam, then at Halpern. Denied. And then he said the line that made half the gallery sit forward all at once. Because I have a feeling your client's education is just beginning. Like this video, if you believe some lessons only arrive when the room finally stops being afraid of you. The city attorney asked to call one final witness before argument, Danielle Whittaker, Noah's mother. Danielle walked in carrying a paper folder so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She was 29, hair pulled into a simple bun, discount store winter coat folded over one arm, exhaustion tucked under both eyes. She looked like a woman who knew exactly how much a missed bus, a broken heater, or one bad bill could wreck a month. "What would you like the court to know?" Judge Caprio asked, allowing her to speak in narrative form. Danielle looked at the bench, then at Liam, then down at the folder. "My son is okay now," she said. "That's the first thing. I don't want anyone thinking he is. He's okay." She had to stop for a second. The room waited. "But that morning," she continued, "he was okay. He was turning gray. The EMT told me to stay calm and I was trying, but then we got there and couldn't get in. I remember seeing that car and thinking, whoever owns that thing has never had to choose between rent and medicine a day in their life." The words were quiet. That made them cut deeper. She opened the folder and took out a crayon drawing. Noah drew this 2 weeks later in therapy. Angela took it to the bench. Judge Caprio looked down at the child's picture, a black car, a red ambulance, a stick figure mother crying, a little blue inhaler floating above a boxy hospital. "He started having nightmares," Danielle said. "Not of the asthma attack, of the car. He would ask me, why didn't the man move? I didn't know what to tell him." A tear slid down her face. She wiped it away quickly, embarrassed to be crying in front of strangers. Liam looked away. If this moment hit you in the gut, share this with someone who still thinks reckless choices only hurt strangers on paper. Danielle then did something unexpected. She did not ask for vengeance. She did not demand jail. She simply said, "I want him to understand that every time people like him laugh off rules, the rest of us carry the danger." Judge Caprio thanked her. Then he turned back to Liam. "This is the point in the hearing where a person with judgment usually stops digging. Do you wish to say anything before the court considers findings?" Brent Halpern whispered urgently. You could see him doing the math. Fine exposure, contempt, public disaster, maybe salvageable if the client apologized now. Maybe. Liam shrugged him off again. "Yeah," he said. "I want to say everyone here is acting like I personally attacked a child. That's insane. And I want to say, for the record, if this court thinks humiliating me is some kind of victory, you should think very carefully about the blowback. There are moments when a room knows history just shifted. This was one of them." The older postal worker actually whispered. He just threatened the judge. He had. He had done it on the record, in open court, in front of cameras. Darnell Reed moved closer. Officer Ruiz's chin lifted half an inch. Brent Halpern closed his eyes like he was watching his own career flash before him. Judge Caprio's voice became even calmer. "Mr. Sterling, are you threatening this court?" Liam held his stare. "I'm saying actions have consequences for everyone." That was enough. Judge Caprio folded his hands. "Let the record reflect that the defendant, after hearing testimony concerning emergency obstruction, witness injury, and a threatening voicemail to court staff, has now chosen to make an additional statement the court may interpret as an attempt at intimidation." Then he paused. And before anyone could speak, the heavy back doors of Courtroom 3B opened. Every head turned. Charles Sterling, IV, entered alone. At first, the room didn't even fully register him. Then the recognition spread like electricity. He was older than the magazine covers people knew, 58, tall, broad-shouldered, silver at the temples, navy Zegna overcoat buttoned high, rain still shining on the leather of his shoes. He carried no assistant, no entourage, no lawyer whispering at his side, just a slim black folder under one arm and a look on his face so controlled it was almost frightening. Liam's whole body changed. Dad, he said, relief flooding into the word before he could hide it. And that relief would turn out to be the biggest mistake of all. People in the gallery leaned forward so far the benches creaked. If this had gone online in real time, this would have been the screenshot. The billionaire father entering the courtroom just seconds after his son threatened Judge Caprio. Everyone thought the script was obvious. Powerful father arrives. Case softened. Quiet deal. Rich people leave through a side door. Everyone thought they knew what came next. They were wrong. Judge Caprio looked down from the bench. Sir, identify yourself for the record. Charles William Sterling IV, he said, father of the defendant. Are you counsel in this matter? No, Your Honor. Then why are you here? Charles Sterling looked at his son for one long, hard second. Because, he said, I just heard what he said to this court. The way he said court told everyone in that room that whatever he had come to do, it was not to rescue Liam. He walked forward with controlled steps, nodded once to the bench, and asked, May I address the court briefly? Brent Halpern stood. Your Honor, I need a moment with my client. You had moments, Judge Caprio said. Charles turned to Halpern without any visible emotion. You're relieved, Brent. The attorney stared. Charles. You're relieved, effective immediately. Gasps audible. Reporters' fingers flew across keyboards. Liam laughed once, short and disbelieving. What are you doing? Charles did not answer him. He handed the black folder to Angela Morty. Inside, he said, are sworn statements from my executive assistant, my son's former driver, and our family office compliance director, along with copies of private settlement attempts that were initiated without the knowledge or consent of this court. There is also a notarized instruction withdrawing financial support for any effort to intimidate witnesses, staff, or city personnel. The entire room went dead silent. That was the unthinkable. He wasn't shielding his son. He was stripping him of the shield in front of everyone. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever seen one sentence destroy a lifetime of entitlement. Because what Charles Sterling said next left even Judge Caprio still for a full second. I would like the court to know, Charles continued, that if my son threatened your staff, disrespected your bench, or used my name to suggest this courtroom could be bought, he did so without my permission, against my values, and with a level of moral cowardice I should have confronted years ago. Liam's face lost color. Dad, stop. Charles finally turned toward him. No. It was a simple word, a father's word, probably one Liam should have heard much more often. No, Charles said again, you've borrowed my name long enough. That was the fifth quote people would repeat later. Liam stepped back like he had been slapped. You don't get to do this to me in public. Charles' voice stayed low. You did this in public. I'm just refusing to hide it in private. If the first half of the hearing was outrage, this was the moment it became something else, something sharper, more intimate, the collapse of a story one man had been telling himself since childhood. Judge Caprio studied Charles Sterling carefully. Mr. Sterling, this court does not conduct family theater. Charles nodded once. Understood, then let me be useful, not theatrical. He asked permission to make a brief statement. The city had no objection. The defense had no coherent position left to offer. Charles took the witness stand. He swore in. And then, under oath, he did something nobody in that room expected from a billionaire father. He admitted he had helped create the boy, now sitting at the defense table. I buried my wife, he said, voice even, and instead of raising my son through grief, I outsourced his consequences. Tutors, handlers, lawyers, donations. I told myself I was protecting him. What I was actually doing was teaching him that fear could be rented and truth could be delayed. Even Judge Caprio leaned slightly forward at that. Charles continued. 3 days after this incident, A member of my family office attempted to contact hospital administration about making the matter go away through donation and private compensation. When I learned of it, I ordered it stopped. That is documented in the folder. Liam shook his head wildly. This is insane. Charles went on as if he hadn't spoken. What I did not know until last week was that my son had also left a threatening voicemail for court staff and had been invoking my name with officers. If I had known earlier, he would have been standing here without counsel paid by me and without access to a single family asset. The room breathed as one. Then came the line that would be clipped and shared and quoted in comments for weeks. Your Honor, if my son believes wealth places him above ordinary decency, then wealth has already ruined him more thoroughly than any sentence you could impose. That was the sixth quote people would repeat later. Liam's hands were shaking now, tiny tremors, barely visible unless you were watching for them. Judge Caprio was. Mr. Sterling, the judge said, what exactly are you asking of this court? Charles answered without hesitation. I am asking the court not to spare him because of me. There it was, the sentence nobody had expected to hear. Not spare him because of me. It hit the room harder than anything else. The reporters stopped pretending they were not stunned. The law students looked at one another like they had just seen a legal ethics lecture become human. Maya Torres pressed her lips together and looked down. Danielle Whittaker just stared. Liam looked at his father like he no longer recognized him. You're punishing me for embarrassing you, he said. Charles' reply came like a blade wrapped in velvet. No, I'm refusing to keep punishing everyone else for your behavior. Judge Caprio let the silence hang. Then he asked the natural question. Why now? Charles inhaled slowly. For the first time, he seemed less like a billionaire and more like a tired father. Because last Thursday I watched the hospital footage alone in my office. I watched that volunteer fall. I watched a nurse drop to one knee in the sleet. I watched a mother carry terror on her face while my son held coffee. And then I listened to his voicemail to your clerk. I realized something ugly. He looked at Liam. He wasn't hiding from me anymore. He had become me at my worst, with fewer breaks and less shame. No one moved. And then Charles added, there is one more item in the folder, a letter from his mother. Liam snapped upright. No. Yes, Charles said. No, you do not get to use her. Charles' jaw tightened. I'm not using her. I'm finally honoring her. The courtroom held its breath. That letter changed the temperature of the room all over again. Like this video, if you believe the hardest truth to hear, is often the one your family has been trying to tell you for years. Judge Caprio opened the envelope slowly. The paper was cream-colored, edges slightly worn, handwriting neat and slanted. He looked up. Mr. Sterling, is this intended for the court to read? Charles nodded. It was written by Evelyn Sterling 6 weeks before she died. She asked me not to give it to Liam unless there came a day when his name, money, or anger started replacing his character. I had hoped that day would never come. Liam's face had gone almost gray. Judge Caprio glanced at the first lines, then paused. This appears personal. I will not read it unless there is agreement. Charles said, I agree. All eyes went to Liam. For 3 seconds he said nothing, then very quietly, read it. Judge Caprio adjusted his glasses. My dearest Liam, he began, and the whole room somehow became smaller. If you are hearing this, then it means life gave you every advantage and still failed to teach you what matters most. That would not be life's failure. It would be mine, and perhaps your father's, and perhaps eventually yours if you choose pride over people. Liam looked at the floor. The letter continued. You were born into comfort, but comfort is a terrible teacher if it is never interrupted by truth. The world will clap for your last name, laugh at your jokes, excuse your impatience, and call your selfishness confidence if you let it. Do not let it. The easiest way to become a small man is to have too much power too early. Somewhere in the back, someone sniffled. My son, if one day you find yourself using money, anger, or charm to escape the pain you caused another person, stop. Stop immediately. Shame will whisper that apology makes you weaker. Do not believe it. The strongest men I have known were not the loudest or richest. They were the first to kneel when they had done harm. Judge Caprio's voice softened on the next line. If you ever confuse being feared with being respected, come back to the truth. The truth is simple. A decent man makes life safer for people around him. By the time he finished, the room was silent in a different way. Not tense now, heavy. Liam still refused to look up, but something in his face had started to come apart. Not publicly, not dramatically, just small fracture. Around the mouth. The collapse begins there sometimes, in the places pride uses to hold itself together. Judge Caprio folded the letter gently. "Mr. Sterling," he said to Liam, "would you like it returned to you?" Liam nodded without speaking. Angela carried it to the defense table. Liam took it like it might burn him. Then the judge asked the question that finally reached beneath the arrogance. "What would your mother think of the man you are being today?" That did it. Not all at once, not with tears, not with a dramatic confession, but the shield slipped. Liam swallowed hard. "You don't know her." Judge Caprio's answer was immediate. "No, but I know love when I hear it, and I know disappointment when a person wastes it." That was the seventh quote people would repeat later. The city attorney recommended maximum fines on all municipal counts, a formal contempt finding, a referral for license review, restitution to the injured parties, and mandatory community service at an emergency care facility not connected to Liam's family donations. Brent Halpern, technically still standing there despite having been fired in front of God and Providence, asked for mercy, citing Liam's age, emotional instability, grief history, and the fact that no death had occurred. That argument almost worked until Judge Caprio asked one more question. "Mr. Sterling," he said to Liam, "before I rule, I'm giving you one final opportunity, not to perform, not to posture, to answer honestly. When you threatened this court, what exactly did you think would happen?" That was the choice moment, the one everything hung on. Liam stared at the bench, stared at the letter, stared at his father. His throat moved once. And then, because shame often fights hardest right before surrender, he chose the wrong answer. "I thought," he said, voice thin and brittle, "that people would remember who my family is." The room almost seemed to exhale disappointment. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. "Thank you for being honest." Then he removed his glasses, set them down, and spoke directly to Liam in a tone so clear and steady it felt carved into the air. "The courtroom is one of the last places in this country where your last name is supposed to arrive empty. No entourage, no stock price, no foundation wing, just your choices. If that frightens you, good. Fear of accountability is often the first honest feeling privileged people have." That was the eighth quote people would repeat later. Nobody in the room would ever forget it. And yet the biggest confrontation was still coming. At 11:03, after a short recess, Judge Caprio returned to deliver findings. The rain outside had turned to a hard silver drizzle streaking down the courthouse windows. Inside, the benches were fuller than before. Word had spread through the building. Clerks from upstairs, a pair of sheriff's deputies, even people waiting for afternoon arraignments found reasons to drift toward Courtroom 3B. Everyone knew something historic was about to happen. Judge Caprio found Liam liable on each municipal count supported by the footage and testimony. He made clear that the court's authority was limited to city violations and contempt matters, and that any civil consequences would proceed elsewhere. The legal language was precise, careful, grounded, but then he set the paper aside and looked directly at the defendant. "There are two roads open to you from this bench," he said. Liam finally met his eyes. The first is straightforward: maximum financial penalties within municipal authority, a formal contempt sanction, a referral for immediate review of your driving privileges, public findings entered. You leave here angry, richer than most cities, and unchanged. The room was silent enough to hear the old clock tick. The second road is harder. It will feel, to someone like you, much harsher than a fine. Restitution paid directly, no family charitable branding attached. 12 months of supervised service at emergency intake and respiratory support, nonprofits approved by the court. A face-to-face apology to each injured party if they consent. Completion of a defensive driving and civic responsibility program. Withdrawal from all non-essential family corporate roles for 1 year. A suspended contempt sanction that becomes active if you mock, threaten, or evade one step of this order. And monthly review in this courtroom. The gallery murmured. This was not a slap on the wrist. This was structured accountability. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. One road protects your ego, the other might save your character. That was the 9th quote people would repeat later. Then he said, "Before I choose for you, I am going to ask the people you harmed one question. If this young man were willing to do the work sincerely, would any of you prefer transformation over simple punishment?" Nobody expected that. It was the unexpected mercy moment, and it changed the room again. Maya Torres answered first, "If he's sincere." Yes, hospitals don't just need money. They need people who finally understand consequences. Lenny Baptiste nodded. "I'm old, Judge. I don't need revenge. I need him to stop making dangerous men look glamorous." Danielle Whittaker held the crayon drawing against her chest and said, "If he really changes, I'd rather my son grow up hearing that people can change than hearing rich people always win." There it was, compassion from the wounded, not softness, strength. And it hit Liam harder than anger had. For the first time, his voice lost every trace of performance. "Why would you even give me that?" Danielle answered with a tired half-smile that somehow carried more power than his family name ever had. "Because I'm not raising my son to become you." That sentence broke something open. Liam pressed his hands flat against the table. His breathing turned shallow. The whole room watched. A few people probably expected another outburst, another threat, another ugly attempt to get control back. Instead, his shoulders caved in. He looked at Maya, at Lenny, at Danielle, at the letter from his mother. And then he began to cry. Not movie crying, not a polished single tear. It was uglier than that. The kind a grown man makes when his body realizes before his mouth does that the old self is finished. He bent his head and covered his face, and the courtroom, which had been ready to hate him for hours, simply watched. This would have been the viral clip, not the threat, not the billionaire father. This, the moment entitlement realized it had been empty all along. Share this with someone who believes real justice isn't just punishment. It's the moment a person finally sees the wreckage they've been calling success. When Liam finally spoke, his voice was shredded. "I don't know how to do this." Judge Caprio answered immediately. "That may be the first useful thing you've said all day." A nervous laugh rippled through the room, releasing some of the pressure without breaking the gravity. Liam looked at Danielle. "I'm sorry" came out first, small and inadequate. Then to Maya, "I'm sorry." Then to Lenny, "I'm sorry." He turned toward Angela Morty, the clerk whose voicemail he had tried to bully. "I'm sorry to you too." Then, after the longest pause of all, he turned to the bench. "And I'm sorry to this court." Judge Caprio did not smile, not yet. "Apologies are seeds," he said. "We will see whether anything grows." That was the 10th quote people would repeat later. Charles Sterling stood still as granite through all of it. Then Liam looked at him, eyes red, and said the words nobody expected from a man who had spent his life performing invulnerability. "Did you ever think I was good?" The question stunned the room because suddenly he sounded less like a billionaire heir and more like a boy. Charles' face changed for the first time. The steel remained, but grief entered it. "I thought you were hurting," he said, "and I was too cowardly to make hurting feel limits." Liam wiped his face with the heel of his hand. "So this is you giving up on me?" Charles shook his head once. "No, this is me stopping the lie that was killing you." Ultimate confrontation. There it was, not money versus law, father versus son, truth versus image. Judge Caprio rose slightly in his chair, not standing but commanding every eye in the room. "Mr. Sterling, here is my ruling." He imposed the maximum fines on the municipal violations, suspended contingent on full compliance with the accountability order. He entered a contempt finding, but suspended active sanction pending completion of the program. He ordered direct restitution for medical costs and lost wages linked to the incident. He referred the matter to the proper state authority for review of driving privileges. He barred any charitable donation in lieu of personal service. He required monthly appearances. He required that Liam complete 1,000 hours of supervised service over 12 months, 400 at emergency patient intake support, 300 with a pediatric asthma outreach nonprofit, 300 with a city road safety program, speaking not as a hero, but as a cautionary example. Then he delivered the line that would lead every local newscast that night. "Mercy is not the absence of consequence. Mercy is consequence with a door left open." That was the 11th quote people would repeat later. He banged the gavel once. For a second, nobody moved. Then the gallery erupted into murmurs, tears, whispers, and the kind of stunned eye contact strangers make when they know they have all seen something rare. But the story still was not over. Because just when people thought the sentence had resolved everything, Charles Sterling asked permission to speak one final time. Judge Caprio hesitated, then nodded. Charles turned toward the bench. "Your Honor, there is an additional matter the court should know. I announced this morning, prior to entering the courthouse, that I would be stepping down for 12 months from all act. I've roles at Sterling Bioventures and the Sterling Family Foundation. Interim leadership has already been installed." That sent another shock wave through the room. Liam looked up stunned. "What?" Charles went on. "For the next year I intend to complete my own service commitment alongside my son, not because the law requires it, because I do." Even Judge Caprio's expression shifted. Danielle Whittaker covered her mouth. Maya blinked hard. One of the law students actually whispered, "That's insane." No, it was bigger than insane. It was responsibility crossing generations. Charles continued, "I taught him by example and omission that status can replace character. I don't believe accountability should be outsourced to him alone." This was the twist nobody saw coming around the moment the whole room thought it had reached the end. The father was not just exposing the son. He was indicting himself. And suddenly the story became morally complicated in the most powerful way. Because easy villains are satisfying. Shared responsibility is transformative. Like this video, if you believe the strongest apology is the one that costs you something real. Judge Caprio considered him carefully. "Mr. Sterling, this court cannot sentence you for what is not charged." Charles nodded. "I'm not asking you to, I'm informing you." Then he turned to Liam. "If I am going to ask you to rebuild yourself," he said, "I am not going to do it from the deck of a yacht." No one in that room would forget that either. Liam stared at his father as if seeing him for the first time in years. Court adjourned at 11:41 a.m., but no one rushed out. The hall outside filled with buzzing voices. The story raced through the building into the rain, across local stations, onto social feeds, into lunchrooms and text threads and comment sections. By that evening, clips of Judge Caprio's lines were being shared with captions like, "This is what justice should sound like, and money couldn't save him, but truth might." Most talked about, most replayed. The kind of courtroom moment people say they'll never forget. But viral moments are easy, change is hard. And the real test always comes after the cameras stop being exciting. 3 weeks later, on January 14, 2025, Liam Sterling reported at 6:55 a.m. to the Pediatric Respiratory Wing Outreach Office on Eddy Street wearing navy scrubs with a volunteer badge clipped crookedly to his chest. No Tom Ford, no Rolex, no driver, just dark circles, cold hands, and the kind of silence that comes when a person no longer trusts himself to speak casually. The supervisor that morning was Gloria Menendez, 56, former ICU administrator, a woman who had seen rich donors, grieving parents, exhausted interns, and ego in every shape it came in. She did not care that Liam had once flown private. "You stack inhaler kits there," she said, pointing to a folding table. "You answer to me. You don't touch patient charts. You don't make speeches. You don't mention your last name unless someone asks. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good, and don't call me ma'am." He nodded. The first week was brutal, not because anyone screamed at him. They mostly didn't. It was worse than that. People simply did not care who he had been. They needed boxes carried, intake chairs wiped down, supply logs updated, kids distracted during breathing treatments, families guided from one waiting area to another. No glamour, no deference, no shortcuts, just usefulness. At one point, a little boy with a Spider-Man inhaler asked Liam if he worked there because he had messed up bad. Liam said, "Yeah." The kid thought about that, then nodded. "My mom says fixing stuff takes longer than breaking stuff." That line followed him home. Meanwhile, Charles Sterling kept his own promise. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he worked alongside traffic fatality prevention volunteers and city youth mentorship programs, often in the same plain blue volunteer polo as everyone else. Photos leaked, of course. Billionaire with trash grabber on city sidewalk. Billionaire stacking folding chairs at community center. People argued online about whether it was sincere or strategic. Judge Caprio, during the first review hearing, cut through all of that in one sentence. "Sincerity is not a press release," he said. "It is repetition." That became quote number 12. At the first 30-day review, Liam stood at the same defense table but looked like an entirely different person. He'd lost the polished swagger. He answered "Yes, Your Honor," and "No, Your Honor," without irony. His service logs were complete. Gloria Menendez submitted a short note: "Works hard, talks little, needs improvement in emotional resilience when confronted by parents, shows up early." Judge Caprio read it aloud. "Needs improvement in emotional resilience," he repeated. "Well, that puts you in the same category as half the people in public life." The courtroom laughed softly. Then came the unexpected twist around month THR. Lee, Danielle Whitaker, asked to address the court again. By then Noah was doing much better. The outreach program had helped stabilize his treatment plan. The heating issue in their apartment had finally been repaired after a tenant advocacy group stepped in. Danielle wore a thrifted navy blazer this time and looked less frightened, more grounded. "Your Honor," she said, "I want the court to know something. My son asked if the man from the car was still helping kids breathe better. I told him yes. Noah said he wanted to give him this." She handed over a folded sheet of paper. Judge Caprio opened it, smiled faintly, then passed it to Liam. It was another crayon drawing. This one showed a black car parked far away from a hospital entrance. A stick-figure man standing beside a wagon full of inhalers. In bright green letters, Noah had written, "Thank you for learning." Liam read it once, then again. His lips parted but no sound came out. That was the breakthrough no one could have scripted cheaply because it was too simple to fake. Not grand forgiveness, not applause, a child's acknowledgement that effort had been seen. Maya Tours also spoke that day. He showed up on Christmas Eve, she said. 6 in the morning, no cameras. Helped move supply bins for 2 hours before his shift started because one of our volunteers called out. I'm not saying he's fixed. I'm saying he's finally uncomfortable in the right direction. Judge Caprio nodded. That may be the beginning of wisdom. Lenny Baptiste, who had become an unlikely favorite in the reviews, added with a grin, and he now stands plenty far away from expensive things. The courtroom laughed harder this time, including Liam. That laughter mattered, not because everything was fine, but because shame had finally made room for humility instead of self-pity. Drop a comment telling us whether you think forgiveness should be earned slowly like this, because by month 3, people in Providence were debating that exact question everywhere. But redemption arcs are never smooth. At month 5, a tabloid photographer caught Liam leaving a private dinner with college friends in Boston. One of them posted a clip of him in a valet lane beside a silver Aston Martin, and social media erupted. Has he learned nothing? Rich kid back to old habits. Fraud. Performance. The footage spread fast. By the next morning, even hospital staff were whispering. At the review hearing, Judge Caprio addressed it directly. Do you wish to explain the clip? Liam did not dodge. My friend handed me his keys while he went back inside, he said. I stood there 30 seconds too long because I froze when I realized where I was. Someone filmed it. I left. That might have sounded self-serving if not for one thing. Gloria Menendez submitted a note confirming he had come to his 6:30 a.m. shift the next day looking wrecked and had volunteered the incident before anyone asked. Then Charles Sterling spoke, but only briefly. He called me afterward, Charles said, not to ask for lawyers, to ask whether he was becoming who he used to be again. Judge Caprio looked at Liam. And what did your father say? Liam answered quietly. He said relapse begins in secrecy, not in struggle. He told me to bring it here. Judge Caprio's response was immediate. Good advice. This was where people realized the father's own transformation was real too. He was no longer using money as anesthesia. He was using truth as structure. That is harder, much harder. Month 7 brought another twist. A letter arrived from Angela Morty, the court clerk Liam had threatened. Court clerks do not write many emotional letters. They have too much work and too little patience for theatrics. So when Judge Caprio opened hers during the review hearing, the room listened closely. Your Honor, he read, I am not writing because I enjoy being noticed from behind my desk. I am writing because on March 22, Mr. Sterling waited after his review to apologize to me again in private, with no cameras present and no one else left in the courtroom except the bailiff. He said he had spent most of his life assuming administrative staff existed below eye level. I told him that was obvious. He accepted that. This does not erase what he did, but it is the first apology I have received in 21 years of court service that sounded less interested in forgiveness than in accuracy. That line drew murmurs all over the room. Accuracy. Not forgiveness, accuracy. It was one of the most mature things anyone had said in the entire saga. By month 9, the city road safety program had Liam speaking to high school students. Judge Caprio required that no speech be polished or branded, no publicity team, no foundation logo.